I never expected my own family to be the reason my dream of buying a home nearly disappeared. But everything changed. During one uncomfortable dinner when my 9-year-old son was treated like he did not belong. I stayed quiet that night, yet, before I left the restaurant, I made one decision that would eventually expose a secret my family had hidden from me for years. My name is Claire Bennett. I am 35 years old, and I work as an emergency room nurse in Dayton, Ohio. I have spent most of my adult life working long shifts, raising my son Mason alone, and saving every extra dollar because I wanted to give him something I never had growing up, a peaceful home where he would always feel safe and wanted. The trouble began at my parents' anniversary dinner, where my older sister Natalie arrived with her husband and 2 children, and everyone received exactly what they wanted from the expensive restaurant. Mason was left without a meal, and when I asked what had happened, Natalie casually pushed a basket of crackers toward him while my father told me that I should have remembered to bring something for my own child. Mason quietly took a cracker and looked down at the table, pretending that he was not embarrassed, but I knew my son well enough to see the hurt in his eyes. I ordered him the meal he wanted, paid for it separately, and then looked around the table at the people I had spent years helping financially before calmly telling them that I was finished paying for everyone else. Nobody laughed after that, and my mother immediately accused me of humiliating the family over something insignificant, but I simply picked up my son's jacket and walked away. I thought the dinner had only revealed how little my family valued me, but 2 weeks later, my mortgage officer called and told me there was a serious problem with my credit report, and that phone call would lead me directly to the secret my family had been hiding. My mortgage officer, Dana, sounded unusually serious when she asked me to come to her office, and I spent the entire drive wondering whether I had forgotten some payment or made a mistake somewhere. When I arrived, she placed several pages on her desk and explained that my credit score had suddenly dropped because a vehicle loan connected to my name was seriously behind, even though I had never owned that vehicle. I immediately knew which vehicle she meant because it belonged to my sister Natalie, and 3 years earlier, my mother had begged me to co-sign the loan because Natalie supposedly needed temporary help. Natalie had promised me she would make every payment, and for a while she did, but Dana showed me that the account was now nearly 3 months behind, putting my dream home in serious danger. Then Dana showed me something even worse, an unfamiliar credit card with almost $11,000 charged to it, and my hands went cold when I saw that the account had been opened using my personal information. The billing address was my parents' house, the account was several years old, and every payment had been made perfectly on time, which meant someone had been carefully using my name without ever letting me know. That evening, I pulled my complete credit reports and began going through every transaction like I was investigating a medical chart at work. Grocery stores, restaurants, gas stations, pharmacy purchases, salon appointments, and family. Celebrations appeared one after another, and then I noticed something that made my heart pound. Several expensive restaurant charges happened on the exact nights my parents had told me they were treating the family. I barely slept that night because the evidence kept replaying in my mind, especially the anniversary dinner where my son had been given nothing but crackers, while everyone else enjoyed expensive food. The next morning, I printed every page, placed the documents inside a folder, and drove straight to my parents' house because before I contacted the bank or the police, I needed to look into my mother's eyes and ask one simple question. How long have you been using my name? My mother was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in, sorting receipts into neat little piles like she had done 100 times before, and for a moment I almost convinced myself that there had to be some innocent explanation. Then I placed the folder in front of her and asked if she knew about the credit card, and the color slowly disappeared from her face as she realized I had already discovered the truth. She tried to explain that the account had been opened during my father's medical crisis, when the family was struggling with unexpected expenses and everyone was frightened about what would happen next. She insisted that she had never wanted to hurt me and had always made sure the payments were made on time. But when I asked why she had never asked for permission, she simply said that she knew I would worry and probably refuse. I could hardly believe her answer, especially when she told me that my sister had also used the card for groceries, gasoline, school expenses, and several family dinners. My mother called it family support, but I called it identity theft, and I told her that the difference between those two things was simple. Family support requires permission, while secretly using someone else's name does not. Then I asked about Natalie's overdue vehicle loan, and my mother became defensive again, explaining that Natalie had 2 children and a difficult household while I had a stable nursing job and no husband depending on me. According to her, I was the one person in the family who could absorb financial problems without falling apart, and hearing her say that made something inside me finally snap because she was not describing my strength anymore. She was describing how useful my sacrifices had become to them. I left the house without arguing, but before I reached my car, my phone started filling with messages from relatives who somehow already knew what had happened. My sister had told everyone that I was trying to destroy her family over a few bills, and while I sat behind the steering wheel reading those messages, I realized the worst part was not losing my family's approval. It was discovering that they had apparently never considered my approval necessary in the first place. By that evening, my phone would not stop ringing, but I refused to answer anyone because I knew every conversation would somehow end with me being blamed for the mess they had created. Then my mortgage officer called again and told me that I had 2 choices: either accept the debt and risk losing my house, or officially report the accounts as fraudulent and prove that I had never authorized them. The decision felt impossible because reporting the fraud could expose my own mother and sister, and I knew exactly what would happen afterward. My family would call me cruel, relatives would stop speaking to me, and Mason might lose the grandparents and cousins he loved. But then I remembered his face at that anniversary dinner and realized I could not teach my son that love meant allowing people to hurt you repeatedly. The next morning, I met Dana at the bank and signed the paperwork disputing the unauthorized credit card charges, then started the process of removing myself from Natalie's vehicle loan. My hands shook while I signed each document, but I kept reminding myself that these were not punishments, they were boundaries, and for the first time in years, I was protecting my future instead of protecting everyone else's comfort. That afternoon, Natalie appeared outside my apartment with her husband, furious and desperate, and she demanded that I cancel the dispute because the bank was already asking questions about their finances. I looked at her and told her that I had spent years rescuing people who never learned how to rescue themselves, and I would not sacrifice my son's home because my family had decided that my credit belonged to them. Natalie started crying and accused me of choosing a house over my family, but I calmly told her that my family had made that choice long before I ever signed the paperwork. When they finally left, I closed the door and leaned against it, terrified about what would happen next, but beneath the fear was something I had almost forgotten existed: the feeling that my life finally belonged to me. The following weeks were exhausting, but the bank eventually confirmed that the credit card charges were fraudulent and removed the balance from my responsibility, while Natalie had to arrange her own solution for the vehicle loan. My family stopped inviting me to gatherings for a while, and although the silence hurt, I slowly realized that being excluded from a table where my son and I were treated like an inconvenience was not the punishment they thought it was. A month later, Dana called with the news I had been desperately waiting for. My mortgage had been approved, and the little house I had nearly lost was finally mine. When Mason ran through the empty rooms for the first time, he chose the bedroom, facing the backyard, and immediately started planning where his books, toys, and favorite blanket would go, while I stood in the doorway trying not to cry because every sacrifice suddenly had a place. My father eventually came to the house alone, carrying an old toolbox he had used when I was a child, and for several minutes, he simply stood on the porch without knowing what to say. He admitted that he had known more about the family finances than he had ever told me, apologized for staying silent, and said he understood too late that keeping peace is not the same thing as protecting the people you love. I did not immediately forgive everyone, because forgiveness does not erase consequences, and rebuilding trust takes much longer than breaking it. I told my father that Mason and I were willing to have a relationship with him, but from that point forward, there would be no secret loans, no borrowed accounts, no financial favors disguised as family obligations, and absolutely no decisions made with my name unless I was standing there giving permission. That evening, Mason and I sat on the back porch beneath the first warm sunset of spring, and he asked me whether I was happy that we finally had our own house. So I pulled him close and told him that the house was wonderful, but the best part was knowing that nobody could ever make us feel like we had to earn our place at the table. I finally understood that family should never be measured by who pays the bill, who carries the burden, or who stays silent, and sometimes the strongest thing you can do is close your wallet, open your eyes, and choose the people who truly depend on you, especially yourself. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.